my versus slash compare. All right, how's everyone doing this evening? Back again with another video for you guys and gals. And tonight, what I have for everyone is my versus slash comparison video between the OG, the Moto X Pure Edition, and the new kid on the block, the Essential Phone PH1. So, without further ado, let's get into this video. Starting it off, the first thing I want to talk about with you guys and gals is the overall build quality and design. Let's start off with the Moto X Pure Edition. Now, from a build quality and design standpoint, I think Motorola did a really good job with this one. The overall build quality is really good. It has a nice grippy texture on the back with your metal sides, and it has a nice tactile and clicky power button and nice ridged volume up and down buttons, and it feels really solid in the hands. And overall, I'd have to say that it has a really nice weight to it. Alright, so in terms of the overall build quality on the Moto X Pure Edition, it's really good. It's more of a functionalist over design and flash approach. Okay, so if I had to frame it up in a sentence, it's functionalist over design and flash. Now, in terms of the overall design, again, it's really good. It's got a nice taper, and again, it fits really solid in your hands. So overall, when it comes to the build quality and design, Motorola did a really good job on this one, and this design pretty much stands the test of time in my opinion. So really solid build quality and design on the Moto X Pure Edition. Now, jumping over to the Essential Phone PH1, you're going to hear more of the same, but a little bit different. Where the build quality and design of the Moto X Pure Edition is more functionalist over flash, this is more of a more modern design with your ceramic backplate and your glass front with metal sides. And in terms of the overall build quality, Essential did a really good job with this one. There's no rattling or creaking of any kind. All the buttons are very tactile and have a nice clickiness to them. Where there is a downside, however, there's not a dedicated ridge for your power button, but overall it's very easy to distinguish because it's kind of small compared to the volume rockers, which are a little bit longer. And again, all the buttons have a nice tactile and clicky feedback to them. But in terms of the overall design, again, this is more flash, but a little bit conservative. Because as you see, as you look through, there's no logos or anything like that. And I really like the fact that Essential went with the logoless approach. So really, when you're out on the street, people are going to be like, wow, what phone is that? You know, it looks really good. What is that? And then when you tell them it's the Essential Phone, you know, it's a new and up-and-coming company, and then you tell them the price, they're going to be like, wow, it's not bad. And then they get to playing around with it, and they're like, it's pretty good for the price. So, jumping back on, though, because I went on a little tangent there, talking about the overall build quality and design for the Essential Phone PH1, it's really good. Good stuff here. Essential did a great job. Now, talking about which one wins in terms of the build quality and design, I'd have to call it a tie. It really comes down to personal preference. Do you want the more functionalist and grippy approach, or do you want the sleek and subtly conservative glass and metal design? It really comes down to personal preference. But in my opinion, I'd have to call it a tie in the build quality and design because both companies did a great job. Alright, up next, let's talk about the displays on these devices. Let's start off with the Essential Phone PH1. So up front here, you have a 5.7-inch 1080p display, a little bit lower than Quad HD. This guy has a 1312 by 2560 display, so a little bit lower than Quad HD. And the only reason why I call it a 1080p display is because all the videos that I play on this guy can only play in 1080p resolution. So regardless of whether I'm using the YouTube app, I'm using the Chrome YouTube extension, I'm using Hulu, Pandora, Netflix, all of that stuff is going to stream at a max rate of 1080p. So I'm going to call this a 1080p display. Okay? But other than that, let me show you guys the numbers because I know some of you guys like that. Other than that, this is a really, really good display. And you can see the overall screen density is 504. And you can see right there, it has a resolution of 1312 by 2560. So not quite Quad HD, but really good. I'm gonna have to call them back. I'm calling them back because I'm in the middle of this video. Matter of fact, let me slap on Do Not Disturb so that does not happen again. There we go. Until I end it. There we go. Now let's keep the video pushing. And I hope they don't hit up my other phone because I'm recording with that one. But putting the numbers aside, in terms of daily usage with this display on the Essential Phone PH1, it's really, really good, and I have no issues. And actually, guys, this is probably one of the brightest displays that I've ever had the pleasure of owning. Right now, I can show you guys, it's at about 10% brightness, and it's really, really bright. In particular, when I use this guy on a daily basis, when I'm in the house, I use it at anywhere between 10% brightness and 25% brightness, and when I take it outdoors, I crank it up to about 50%, and that about does it. Everything is very legible, and it's very crisp and clear, and I've had no issues with it. So overall, I think Essential picked a nice quality display for their device. See, she's calling back. I'm gonna have to. I'll tell her later on that I was recording. I'll hit her up later. Sorry, boo-boo. It is what it is. Anyways, let's move on to the display on the Moto X Pure Edition. Now right here, when we talk about the display on the Moto X Pure Edition, we have a 5.7-inch Quad HD display. And this got your traditional approach to it. So this is a 1440 by 2560 display. And let me show you guys the numbers because I know some of you guys like to see that. And then we'll keep it pushing. So let me pull this up. And you can see right there, 1440 by 2560. And you can see it has a screen density of 521. I think I've always messed this up in my previous videos, but I believe that's about right. About 515 or 521. Some apps don't get it right. But yeah. Other than that, talking about the display in terms of daily usage, this is a really, really good display. Outdoors, I've had no issues. I got to crank the brightness to about 75%. Indoors, I keep it at about anywhere from about 35 to 50. But other than that, it's a really, really good display. And for a 2-year-old device, Motorola did a really good job picking this Quad HD display for their device. And overall, this is a really, really solid display. And I've had no issues. Even though this bad boy has some dead pixels now, you can't really tell the difference when you're looking at it and using it in daily usage. You really have to put a dark background on to see that, but it is what it is. Overall, this is a really, really good display, and Motorola did a really good job. Now, in terms of displays, you guys are probably wondering who won. And again, this is where I have to call it a tie. Both of these companies did a really, really good job. And you guys know me, I'm not a big fan of resolutions and throwing a lot of numbers at you guys. A good display, in my opinion, is a good display. If a company comes out with a crappy display, I'm going to tell you it's a crappy display. And in this regard, both Motorola and Essential, Motorola now owned by Lenovo, and Essential, the nice new startup, did a really good job with their displays, and I've had no issues with either one. So overall, I'm going to have to call it a tie in that regard. Now, moving on, the next thing I want to talk about with you guys is the overall hardware and software in both of these devices. Let's start off with the Moto X Pure Edition. Now, hardware-wise, when we talk about the Moto X Pure Edition, this guy has a 3000 milliamp hour battery, It has 3 gigs of RAM and 16 gigs of onboard storage with microSD card expansion. Other hardware, this guy is packing the Snapdragon 808, I think it's a hexacore processor, 6 cores, hexacore processor, and the Adreno 418 GPU. Other hardware, this guy has a 21 megapixel camera on the rear, which is capable of 4K video recording at 30 frames a second, 1080p at 30 frames a second, and 720p at 30 frames a second, and 720p slow motion at 120 frames. Okay? And you got your dual flash on the back as well. Other things up front here, you have a 5 megapixel camera, which is capable of recording 1080p video and 720p slow motion. You got your front-facing flash, which is really good. You got your dual front-firing speakers, which is top-notch and one of my favorite features of this device. And you got, again, your 5.7-inch display, which is really good. And oh, if I forgot to mention it, this device also supports microSD card expansion that you can make internal storage, which is really nice. So the fact that it only has 16 gigs of onboard storage is not an issue. You just go out there and purchase a nice high quality SD card, and now you got tons of storage. Alright, so that pretty much does it for the hardware on the Moto X Pure Edition. Now let's jump over to the Essential phone, and then we'll come back and talk about the software on both of these devices. Now, in terms of the hardware on the Essential phone, this guy is packing a 3040 milliamp hour battery. It has 4 gigs of RAM and 128 gigs of internal storage. No micro SD card expansion. In terms of other hardware, this guy has a Snapdragon 835 octa-core processor and an Adreno 540 GPU. It has dual 13 megapixel cameras on the rear, 1 primary sensor and 1 monochrome sensor. It has laser autofocus and dual LED flash. And it also has module support with a built-in, really fast fingerprint sensor that just works and is very responsive. Okay? Up front, you have an 8 megapixel sensor. Oh, I didn't even tell you about the rear. On the rear, the 13 megapixel primary camera is capable of recording 4K videos at 30 frames a second, 1080p 30 videos, 1080p 60 videos, 720p 30 videos, and 720p 120 frames slow motion video as well. Jumping over to the front now, back on task, 5x5, we got an 8 megapixel front facing camera, which is also capable of recording 4K videos at 30 frames a second and 720p videos, okay? Other than that, again, we have a 5.7-inch 1080p display. Well, not quite Quad HD. Alright? And that pretty much does it for the hardware on the Essential phone. Alright. Now, talking about the software on both of these devices, this is pretty much where you can almost call these devices siblings. Both of these devices are running a stock version of Android 7.0 Nougat. In particular, where the Essential phone has the leg up is that the Essential phone is running Android 7.1.1 Nougat, where the Moto X Pure Edition is running Android 7.0 Nougat. So that's the only difference there. And some other key hardware differences that I forgot to point out as well. The Essential phone does not incorporate a headphone jack. So everything that you got to do is done via the USB Type-C port, and it only has 1 bottom firing speaker. Okay, so there is that, because I forgot to point that out. Whereas the Moto X Pure Edition does feature a 3.5mm headphone jack and does have dual front firing speakers, but it has the older micro USB charging, but it does support turbo charging as well. Where the Essential phone supports rapid charging, so they both have quick charging. just because I forgot to point that out. Now, jumping back on with the software, both of these guys perform very, very similar because they're both running a very stock version of Android with a few custom features thrown in. Okay, so they really didn't have too much bloatware in terms of out the box. Okay, with the Moto X Pure Edition, you had your Moto app, which incorporates your Moto display, your Moto voice, and some of your Moto gestures. So in particular, your Moto display is just when your device is off, you can wave your hand over to see any incoming notifications, or when you have an incoming notification, it will light up and you can act upon it just by touching. Other features that Motorola included on top of stock Android, you got your quick launch camera gestures, so you could double tap the power button to launch the camera, or quick twist of the wrist, get you into the camera, quick twist of the wrist again, take you to the front facing camera. Really good stuff there. And then you have your Moto voice support, so you could program a custom catchphrase that you can use to interact with your device using your voice, similar to Google Now, but in some cases a little bit better than Google Now, in some cases a little bit worse, but it still is a very, very nice feature. Okay? Other than that, you have a pretty much stock version of Android 7.0 Nougat. Okay? Now, talking about the Essential phone, again, you have more of the same thing. You have a stock version of Android 7.1.1 Nougat, and pretty much this guy came with only the bare essentials on it, and everything you guys see on this device is stuff that I loaded up. The only thing that came on this device out of the box is the bare essentials Google's apps, like the Play Store and maybe Gmail and a few other things. But other than that, it's a pretty bare bones experience with Android on top, and there was absolutely no bloatware on it. And the only key feature that I could see that Essential has thrown into this guy is, one, you got your quick double press to launch the camera. Okay, and you can do this from any screen. So you can see I have 2 camera apps installed on this guy. So you can do that, bam, from any screen, or you can even do it when the device is off. Bam, take you into the camera. Or you have a nice fingerprint sensor notification pull down gesture. So you just swipe down and it pulls down the notification shade. Now my hands are kind of slippery, so it's not working out too well. But other than that, that's pretty much the only feature that Essential phone has put into this guy. Other than that, as I said, you have a stock build of Android, which you can customize to your heart's content. So in terms of the software, it's pretty much a tie across the board. They're both running stock Android with a few custom features thrown in, and in terms of the overall software performance and day-to-day usage, it's been a very fluid and snappy experience on either device, with the exception of the occasional app slowdown with a bunch of apps open in the background. That's pretty much just prone to happen on pretty much any Android device. Now, it tends to happen a little bit slower when you have a flagship device or a mid-range device other than a budget device, but it will happen on pretty much every Android device. But other than that, it's pretty much a tie. It's a pretty much seamless and enjoyable experience across either of these devices. So in terms of hardware and software, although the Moto X Pure Edition doesn't have the most up-to-date hardware, it still handles itself quite well, and the Essential Phone PH1 is probably about the latest and greatest you can get. Well, not really now because it's 2018 and the Snapdragon 845 devices getting ready to come out, but this was the latest and greatest that you can get for 2017. But that being said, putting that aside, I'm going to have to call the hardware and software experience a tie. Okay? Now, keeping it moving, up next, the next thing I want to talk about with you guys is the overall Wi-Fi performance in these guys. And pretty much, it's the same across both devices. So let's knock this out quick, fast, and in a hurry. In terms of Wi-Fi, Both devices have across the board Wi-Fi 802.11, BGNN, and AC dual band. So what does that mean? You have support for your 2.4 gigahertz band and your 5 gigahertz band wherever applicable. And the Wi-Fi performance on both of these devices has been a joy, and I haven't had any issues. But real quickly, I just want to pull up 2 YouTube videos, one to demonstrate the displays on both of these devices, and one to demonstrate the overall Wi-Fi performance and speaker quality. So let me go ahead and pull this up real quick, and we'll keep it moving. Pull that up over there, and let's pull this up over here on the Moto X Pure Edition. And bam. And now let's start with the Moto X Pure Edition. So you can see this is at some really good brightness here. Let me turn the volume down because that's not important right now. So this is at a decent brightness, and I don't know how well my camera's going to do it justice, but this just pops. And just in case y'all wanted to know what resolution this video is, you can see this is a 4K video. So let's put it on 4K. So you can see now it's on 4K, and this display is excellent. Excellent. This is a nice quality display, and these colors just pop. Really, really good. Really good. Alright. And now, matter of fact, let me prime it for the speaker test, and then we'll jump over to the essential phone. So prime this up for the speaker test here. Let that ad roll through real quick. Really good movie. If y'all haven't checked out Cloverfield Paradox, you need to check it out. Really solid movie there, and you will not be disappointed. Alright. And let's skip. And here we go. Hit pause. Alright. Now let's give y'all a display test on the essential phone. And again, a really, really good display here. Let me turn that volume down because that's not important right now. Really, really solid display. And again, really, really bright display as well. And this just pops. So even though it's not a Quad HD display, a little bit lower than Quad HD, it just pops. It's a really, really nice display. Really good stuff here. Okay. Now let's load up the speaker test. And for the speaker test and Wi-Fi test, let's start off with the essential phone PH1. 100% volume. Enjoy, guys. Turn it up. I'm going to scrub through the video a little bit so you can see how the Wi-Fi performs. Then we're going to just let it play so you can hear how the speakers perform. Then we're going to keep it moving. Alright. Okay, real quick Wi-Fi test, real quick speaker test on the essential phone. Now let's move on to the Moto X Pure Edition. Right, and we gotta speed this video up because she looked like she about to die. Crank it up to 100. So, real quick speaker test there for you guys. Now, real quick Wi-Fi test, and you guys could see in terms of the Wi-Fi, didn't have any issues on either of these devices. Now, in terms of the speaker quality and overall speaker performance, I'd have to give the W to the Moto X Pure Edition. It was just fuller, and it had more depth to it and more bass as well, and it got a lot louder in my opinion, whereas the Essential phone pretty much just was very loud, crisp, and clear, but was lacking in the bass department and the depth as well. And also, I overall prefer the placement of the Moto X Pure Edition speakers as opposed to the placement of the Essential phone speakers. In my opinion, all smartphones should have front-firing speakers. It's just an overall better placement as opposed to the bottom-firing or side-firing speakers on some flagships. So that pretty much does it for the Wi-Fi and speaker test. And again, in terms of the Wi-Fi, call it a tie. No issues with the Wi-Fi on either device. And in terms of the speaker test, we're going to get a W to the Moto X Pure Edition. Alright, next thing I want to talk about now is the overall band support on both of these devices. And really, this is why I love unlocked devices. In particular, globally unlocked devices are the best, because these devices have band support for every carrier in the United States, whether it be the primary 4 carriers or any GSM carrier in the United States and any GSM carrier abroad. You pop these SIMs in and they're just gonna work, okay? So you can see the Essential phone has all of those bands. And the Moto X Pure Edition pretty much has the same loadout minus 3 bands. So we pulled it up here. You can see pretty much the same loadout minus band, minus band 42, 43, and band 66. But pretty much these two devices will work on any carrier in the United States and any GSM carrier abroad or in the States as well. So in terms of LTE bands and coverage support, you should be covered on either device. It's going to be pretty solid on either device that you decide to pick up. Really, really good stuff. Really good stuff. So that covers the bands. Now let's keep it moving. Up next now, I just want to talk about the Bluetooth on both of these devices. Now in terms of Bluetooth, the Essential phone has Bluetooth 5.0 and the Moto X Pure Edition has Bluetooth 4.1 technology in it, okay? And when it comes to the Bluetooth, I have to call it a tie. Now, previously in other Versus videos, you guys have heard me say that the Bluetooth on the Moto X Pure Edition was pretty bad because it had a pretty bad software glitch in it. Well, after the Android 7.0 Nougat update, I found that that glitch has pretty much went away. And as a result, the overall Bluetooth performance on the Moto X Pure Edition is really, really good. So in terms of the Bluetooth performance on either of these devices, it's really, really good. Sure, the Moto X Pure Edition does not have the most up-to-date Bluetooth module in it, but it still performs really good for what it is. So it is what it is. In terms of Bluetooth, didn't have any issues with the Bluetooth. Now that both of these devices are running on 7.0, the Bluetooth has been a joy on either device. So if you're very Bluetooth heavy like myself, you got a bunch of Bluetooth headphones, a bunch of Bluetooth speakers, you Bluetooth to your car, so on and so forth, you shouldn't have any issues with either device. Okay? And the same can be said of the next thing we're going to talk about, which is the GPS. In terms of the GPS on either of these devices, it has been a joy, and I haven't had any issues with the GPS on either of these devices. Anything that had to do with using the GPS was pretty much a joy. Turn-by-turn navigation, so on and so forth. Anything, didn't have any problems with the GPS on either of these devices, and that's very important for me because, as I've said before in a lot of my previous videos, I'm very GPS dependent, so I need a device with a solid GPS, and I'm very happy to report that both of these devices deliver in spades. So if you're very GPS dependent like myself, you're not going to have any issues. Now, up next, the next thing I want to talk about with you guys is the overall call quality and speaker call quality on both of these devices. And pretty much, I'd have to say that it, again, is a tie across the board. In terms of the receiver call quality on both of these devices, it's really good. It's very loud, crisp, and clear, but I do wish that it got a little bit louder. Same thing for both receivers. And same thing for the speaker calls as well. It's very loud, crisp, and clear, but I feel like they could have gotten just a touch louder for the speaker calls. But in terms of general usage, aside from the fact they're just a little bit too low, they could be a little bit higher, they're both pretty good. So in terms of speaker call quality and receiver call quality, both of these devices are tied again, and they're pretty good. Not great, but pretty good. Okay? So moving on now, this is where we talk about the cameras. And in the interest of speed, I'm not going to talk about the camera interfaces, but if you do want a more in-depth look on the cameras and the camera interfaces, please check out my full reviews of both of these devices, which will be linked down below in the video description. But in terms of the cameras, and I know I'm going to probably get a lot of backlash for this, but I'm going to have to call it a tie. Regardless of whatever camera you pick up, you're going to be able to take some really good photos and some really good videos. Whether it be 4K, 720p, 1080p, slow motion video, you're going to take some really good video. Where these differ, however, is with the Essential phone, you could take portrait mode video and monochrome video. Whereas with the Moto X Pure Edition, you can't do that. Okay? But other than that, both of these phones take some really good photos and some really good video with the front-facing and rear-facing cameras. Where you would have to give the Essential the slight bump is that it can do 4K with the front-facing camera, but where the Moto X Pure Edition fights back is you can do slow motion with the front-facing camera as well. So it kind of